So I've been asked a couple of times, what goes through my brain when I'm making new decks? How do I know what I want to play next? And a lot of times, I don't really know what I want to build next. So I go to EDH Rec a lot of the times when I'm trying to figure out what I want to play new. I try not to stick around the same things every time. I like to go to EDH Rec and I like to think about what colors I want to play. I like to think about what themes haven't I played before. And so for this one, I was kind of poking around a couple of weeks ago and I was looking, and Aristocrats isn't one that I usually do. I've tried it a couple of times and I just haven't liked it. I've kind of looked at different colors, and when I think about it, I like to do things that haven't been done often. So Dimir in this format hasn't really been looked at. I like to look at some of the commanders that kind of pop up first, but realistically, I like to do things that haven't been done before. So Eloise is kind of in that spot where she doesn't get played a lot. And she says, whenever another creature you control dies, investigate, and whenever you sacrifice a token, surveil one. But wait, if I'm surveilling on every token, that includes treasures too. That includes every token. I think I know who I want to build around. Alright, so here we go. Eloise Nephalia Sleuth, right there. Yeah, so she kind of piqued my interest. Again, I haven't done Aristocrats before. I've tried it in a couple different colors. Never in Dimir, though, and she just is super interesting. I feel like Surveil wasn't really used a lot when it first came out. Investigate was a little broken in standard and stuff, but like, it's just a different format of Aristocrats than what I'm really used to, so I was just really interested in it. So that's what we're going with today, and so today is just a little deck tech on Eloise. Alright, so the first thing to kind of talk about when we're talking about deck techs and stuff is lands, right? Let's see here. I usually don't like going over lands, and I've said that in a lot of my deck techs, just because this is something that is really dependent on the person that's playing, their budget, what they like, what they don't like, what their play group does. And so like I'll kind of go through this kind of quickly. I have 3 islands, I've got a bunch of swamps. There's 33 lands in total: Bajuka Bog, Mortuary Mire, a Watery Grave, Morphic Pool, Sunken Hollow, Drowned Catacomb, Shipwreck Marsh, Choked Estuary, Temple of Deceit, Dismal Backwater, Waterfront District, Mist Vault Bridge, and then a Thriving Isle, Thriving Moor, Black Dragon Gate, Sea Gate, Command Tower, Reliquary Tower, and Nephalia Academy. This is a new one that I'm putting in all of my decks just because that ability is so good. If a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard a card, you may reveal that card and put it on top of your library instead of putting it anywhere else. Really like that, and it's super cheap. Treasure Vault helps get those treasures. A Buried Ruin helps you get artifacts back out. Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Fabled Passage, just to search out those lands. So yeah, I mean, this offers a lot of versatility, and nobody, I won't say nobody, people have their own feelings about tap lands or situational tap lands. I think the only one anybody would really agree on that really needs to be in here is probably Watery Grave and Morphic Pool, but realistically, it's up to your play group and what's important. It really defines how you want to build your land stuff. So that's what's important to me, and so I kind of threw those in there. Alright, next let's talk about some ramp here. So Dreamscape Artist is one that I always throw in blue. It's stupid cheap to ramp with and to kind of filter out that land out of your deck. It's a little expensive with the 3 costs to activate, the tap, discard a card, sacrifice a land. That is a lot, but if you're drawing a bunch of cards to replace the cards you're discarding, pulling those basic lands out of your deck and thinning it out is a really good thing to add in there. Burnished Heart, of course, is a 3-drop artifact creature that you pay 3, sacrifice it, search your library for 2 basic land cards. Solemn Simulacrum. When it comes out, you search your library for a basic land, put that card on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. Then, when it dies, you can draw a card. And in an Aristocrat deck, your creatures are going to die a lot, and pull them back, and then die again. So this is a really good auto-include. Dimir Signet, Dimir Locket, Command Sphere, all tap for your colors. Dimir Locket and Command Sphere allow you to draw a card when you pay into them or sacrifice them. Thought Vessel, you have no maximum hand size. That's really good. Plus, you get to tap and add a colorless, and Decanter of Endless Waters is just like it, but you get to add 1 mana of any color. Sol Ring, you can tap for 2 colorless. Arcane Signet, you tap for any color in your commander's color identity. And then Treasure Vault. This one's a little different, and I kind of include it just because it's a little bit fun. I kind of like a little chaos and a little unknown, so when you pay for sacrifice it, you roll a d20. You could roll a 1, and you could lose 3 life. Or if you roll a 2 through a 9, you gain 5 treasure tokens, which that'll get you Eloise right out. 10 through 19, you gain 3 life and draw 3 cards. That's always appreciated. And when you roll a 20, and that 20 there, search your library for a card. If it's an artifact card, you can put it directly out there. So, I mean, there's downside to it. You could roll a 1, but for me, it's just a lot of fun, so I included it in there. Next, let's talk about some of the things that really make this deck sing. Academy Manufacturer. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create 1 of each. Eloise, again, remember, whenever another creature dies, or that you control, you get to investigate, which means you create a clue token. With Academy Manufacturer out there, that means you get a clue, a food, and a treasure every time. And then, when you sacrifice any of those tokens, whether they be clue, which let you draw a card, food, which when you tap and sacrifice it, it gives you life, or treasure, when you tap and sacrifice it, it gives you mana, yeah, you'll be surveilling on top of making all of these tokens. So, definitely one you want to include in there. Contraband Kingpin, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield you control, scry 1. Heck yeah. Enhanced Surveillance, you may look an additional 2 cards each time you surveil. That's 3 cards you're looking at. You can only get rid of 1, because when you surveil, you look at the top card of your library, you may put that card into your graveyard. So you're only putting 1 card into your graveyard if you so choose, but you're looking at the top 3 cards of your library. Plus, if you ever get low, you can exile this and shuffle your graveyard into your library. Very nice. Then Erdwalt Illuminator. It's a 1/3 flyer, but really we want this effect. Whenever you investigate for the first time each turn, investigate another time. So doubling up that investigation, getting 2 clue tokens out there, definitely a must include. Now, the creatures that you really want in there to make this deck operate as an Aristocrats. The theme is your creatures or tokens, when they die, your opponents lose life and you gain life, or even some of these you don't gain life, maybe you draw a card instead, but there's some advantage that you get off that, on top of, you know, your opponents dying in the process. Nadir Nightblade, whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. Again, tokens, clues, food, your creature tokens in the process, all of them will be hitting your opponents. Vindictive Vampire, whenever another creature you control dies, Vindictive Vampire deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. Blood Artist, whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. Agent of the Iron Throne, commander creatures you own have, whenever an artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. This is going to require to have Eloise out, but usually you're going to have her out anyway. Sir Conrad, man, this is a good one, especially with the Surveil. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if you're putting cards into your graveyard off your surveil, you're triggering Sir Conrad. If your creatures are dying, you're triggering Sir Conrad. It's just a great one. Midnight Reaper. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. There are non-token creatures in here that you will want to sacrifice, and so you'll be drawing cards and dealing damage off that. And lastly, Smothering Abomination. It's a devoid creature, which means it has no color, which really doesn't mean anything much for this deck, but at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. So you'll be drawing tons of cards off of Smothering Abomination. Alright, so how are we going to sacrifice creatures? Let's look at that. Witch's Oven is an excellent one, and it's gonna combo well with another card we're gonna talk about later, but it's tap, sacrifice a creature, you create a food. If its toughness is greater than 4, then you make 2. Plumb the Forbidden is an instant. As an additional cost to the spell, you can sacrifice 1 or more creatures, and when you do, copy it for each creature sacrificed this way. You draw a card and lose 1 life. So yes, you'll lose a couple life, but you will be able to draw a ton of cards off of that. Shadowheart Dark, just a card. You pay 2, tap it, sacrifice another creature, draw X cards, where X is that creature's power, which there will be some creatures in here that whenever you tap, or I'm sorry, not tap, whenever you sacrifice a creature, you'll be putting 1/1 counters on it, which will make this more and more strong. Vampiric Rites, you pay 2, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Dockside Chef is like it, pay 2, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card. Skullport Merchant, whenever it comes out, make a treasure token. Then you can also pay 2, sacrifice another creature or a treasure, and draw a card. And then here's what I was talking about before. Sacrifice an artifact creature, put a 1/1 counter on Defiant Salvage. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery, which means on your turn. Bloodflow Connoisseur, sacrifice a creature, put a 1/1 counter on him, but without that, the downside of having to do it as a sorcery. You can do it at any point in time. Woe Strider, whenever it enters in, create a 0/1 white goat creature token, and then when you sacrifice another creature, scry 1. And then it has Escape, which if it's in your graveyard, you can cast it from there for the escape cost, and then it gets 2 1/1 counters if you do. Then Viscera Seer, sacrifice a creature, scry 1. Tevesh Svat, this one's a really good one because it makes tokens with that +2, create 2 0/1 black thrall creature tokens. Then its +1 is you may sacrifice another creature or planeswalker, and if you do, draw 2 cards. Then draw another card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. And then, if you do somehow leave this on the battlefield for a good amount of time, you can -10 him, gain control of all commanders, put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. That can get gross. Then, if you really wanted to be real mean, you could send those commanders to the graveyard with Phyrexian Altar or Ashnod's Altar. Phyrexian Altar, sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. And Ashnod's Altar, you pay nothing, sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. That means as an instant, you can you utilize the stack to be able to sacrifice. So, those are all great additions, getting cards sacrificed. What do you want to sacrifice, though? A couple of them will be Cauldron Familiar. This is the one that combos well with Witch's Oven. Whenever Cauldron Familiar enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Then if you sacrifice a food token, return Cauldron Familiar from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you sacrifice a food token, then you pull Cauldron Familiar out. Then you tap Witch's Oven and sacrifice Cauldron Familiar to get a food token. And you're able to just do that over and over as long as you can untap it or on somebody's end step, whatever it may be. Reassembling Skeleton. Pay 2, return Reassembling Skeleton from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So as long as you can pay 2, you can constantly pull this thing back. and with Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar and a couple of other cards that are in this deck that I'll go over, you can do this constantly, over and over, and just end the game. Jadar Ghoul Caller of Nephalia. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed, which you will be able to use that token to sacrifice with. This one's a fun one. Endrick Sar Master Breeder. Whenever you play a creature spell, put X 1/1 Black Thrall creature tokens into play, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. When you control 7 or more Thralls, sacrifice Endrick Sar. So this one's a fun one thematically, thinking about just Thralls overcoming the Necromancer that's bringing them up. That's just kind of fun, but with all of the creatures that you will be casting, you will be creating tokens that you'll be able to sacrifice. As long as you keep the Thrall count down to below 7, you'll be good to go though, and you'll be able to keep throwing those Thralls out there. If you misplay, you can end up accidentally killing off Endrick. There are ways to get it back, and we'll talk about that later though. Carrier Thrall, whenever it dies, create a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token that has sacrifice the creature, add colorless. And then this one's a fun one, Endless Cockroaches. I hate cockroaches, and I feel grossed out holding this card, but when it dies, you return it to the owner's hand. Again, it combos well with a bunch of cards that we'll be talking about, not least of which will be this next one that we're talking. Pitiless Plunderer. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token. Sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So if you have any of the altars out along with Pitiless Plunder, you're going to be able to cast this back and forth a lot. Next to talk about is Dictate of Erebos. With all of these sacrifices, this is an auto-include. It has flash, and whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So this will help clear the board while letting you continually spam those sacrifices. Now, Viconia, Drow Apostate. We're going into things that will get those cards back out of the graveyard here. Viconia says at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, return a creature card at random from your graveyard to your hand. Again, this is just the chaos side of me coming out. At the beginning of my upkeep, who knows what's going to come out? Maybe it'll be something good, maybe it'll be something I don't really want to have, but it's all a dice roll, and I kind of enjoy that. Ruthless Technomancer. Now, this one is gross. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature you control. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to that creature's power. Again, some of these monsters can get super big, and so you can create a bunch of treasure tokens off of that. Then, you can pay 3, sacrifice X amount of artifacts, return target creature with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X can't be 0. Keep in mind with that if you have Eloise on the field, you will be getting a bunch of clue tokens. So if you have a power 1 creature that you're going to be able to bounce back and forth, you will be able to do that a lot as long as you can pay that mana cost. Whisper Blood Liturgist, on top of being able to be a sack outlet with its tap sacrifice 2 creatures ability, but the outcome is return target creature card from your graveyard to your library, so you'll be able to pull those creatures back. Lastly is Finale of Eternity. This one's fun because it destroys up to 3 target creatures with toughness X or less, so you pay into X, and whatever the toughness is, X or less, that those 3 targets die. Then, if X is 10 or more, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can be sitting at nothing, pay in 12, and suddenly have an entire board to work with. That'd be lots of fun. Alright, let's talk about protections. Ashiok, Dream Renderer. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library. So a lot of my play group doesn't do a lot of search. I kind of hold this in just in case I play against some more powerful decks. We tend to stay away from the 2-drop searches. So, like, Dictate, or no, not Dictate. Oh, there's a couple of them that we'll get into. There's a couple searches that will allow us to kind of go through, but we tend to stay away from those 2-drops. This is realistically there to kind of counter some of those more powerful decks and could honestly be easily switched out with something else, but it's a fun one I added. Lazotep Plating, amass 1, and you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Excellent one for any of those ones that try to make you do something, whether it be discard or sacrifice. As long as you have hexproof, you can't be targeted for that stuff. Propaganda. Creatures can't attack you unless their controllers pay 2 for each creature he or she controls that are attacking you. Sometimes your board state can get a little low when you're sacrificing all your creatures and stuff, and propaganda is really there to just dissuade other people from attacking. Arcane Denial, counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of your next turn's upkeep, and you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So it's a good little 2-drop counter spell. It can counter anything. There's a draw effect that kind of hurts in the long run, but honestly, if it's a big spell or a big piece to their board, you're going to want to counter it, and so this will outweigh that cost. And then Counterspell on top of that. Another little 2-drop counter target spell. Honestly, not really looking to control a board in this case. Sometimes Aristocrats can turn into a game of solitaire, but those big combo pieces are what those counter spells are there for. In Garruk's Wake and Blood Money both kind of do the same thing. In Garruk's Wake, destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control, which honestly for 9, that's a lot, but it has the added benefit of not hitting your stuff. While Blood Money says destroy all creatures, which includes your board, but for each non-token creature destroyed this way, you create a tapped treasure token. That's going to be a lot of treasure tokens a lot of times. Another 2 that kind of get added, and you can kind of include these as lands, because on the back side, if you see down here, it says that on the other side it comes in as a land, which is fine. But Glasspool Mimic says you may have Glasspool Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's a shapeshifter rogue in addition to its other types. Some of the cards that you might want this to come in and as is Pitiless Plunderer, something that's going to get you some added benefits when you're sacking stuff. Malakir Rebirth. Choose target creature you lose 2 life. Until end of turn, that creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Honestly, gonna be able to sack stuff a lot with this and get it back real quick, so definitely a cool benefit. Now these 3 are kind of some weird ones that I kind of like to just add in there for funsies. They could be easily replaced, but honestly, if I'm at the point where I'm casting 6-drop copies, the game's going a little long, and we're just kind of having fun at that point. So that's why I've included these 2, especially Followed Footsteps and Tomb of Horrors. They both kind of do the same thing, adding copies of different things. Tomb of Horrors Adventurer has the added benefit of initiative when it enters the battlefield, and then whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. If you've completed a dungeon, copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copies. Followed Footsteps is specifically an enchantment aura, which means you play it on a creature, and on the upkeep, you make a token of that enchanted creature. Time Sieve. This one is a little weird. The recursion for artifacts is low. I just kind of have it in there for fun. You tap, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. It can be good for if you just need 1 more turn and you could close out a game. This is excellent for it. A lot of times this is added into combo decks to be able to just keep having extra turns after extra turns. That's not really why it's in here. There's very little artifact recursion, so it's just in here for hopefully closing out a game or just for funsies. All right, let's talk about searches. Again, my playgroup doesn't really play with 2-drop searches, so anything other than 2 drops are kind of fine. So Diabolic Tutor, for instance, is a 4-drop. Search your library for a card and then put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So it's definitely a good tutor. It just doesn't come in handy until late game when you can actually cast it and be able to do something with it. And then Tamiyo's Journal is very specific. It's a 5-drop legendary artifact, and at the beginning of my upkeep, I can investigate and have another clue that comes out. Then I can tap, sacrifice 3 clues, search your library for a card, and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So these are good tutors. They're just very specific and not overpowered or anything like that. They could definitely be switched out for some more powerful stuff if your playgroup is looking at a different power level, but it's just not how we like to play. All right, let's talk about closing out the game. Tendrils of Agony is a really good one. It has Storm, and whenever target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Storm is whenever you play a spell, copy it for each spell played before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. Remember endless cockroaches, you might be able to just spam that over and over and over. Maybe you don't have a combo piece though, that whenever it comes out or dies, you're dealing damage. But that spell is counted in a storm count throughout your turn. If at any point you have Tendrils of Agony that can cast it, and you can cast it at any point during your turn because it has sorcery, whatever. This can close out that game for you. If you're just cycling that endless cockroach over and over and over and don't really have anything else, Tendrils of Agony can help close it. March of the Machines. Now this is an interesting one because it can also lose you the game. Each non-creature artifact is an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its converted mana cost. Now, the reason that it's in here is that, again, remember, Eloise says, whenever another creature you control dies, investigate. Now, as long as you have a creature or an enchantment out there that whenever a creature dies, opponents lose 1 life, this will continually ping your opponents down to death. Your clue tokens have no mana cost. They're 0, which means their toughness is 0, which means as soon as they enter in, they die. Which means as soon as it's a creature that's dying, it triggers Eloise again, which brings out another clue that dies, and it's an endless cycle, and as long as you have that combo piece in there, you win. If that combo piece gets taken out, you lose, however. And that's because you've instigated a board that has no end, and you automatically get kicked out of the game because the cycle doesn't end. It doesn't end in a draw. You lose. That's just how the rules work. Rise and Shine. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4 1/1 counters on each artifact that becomes a creature this way. And then it has Overload. You may cast this spell for its Overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So you'll be able to, all your clues, all your food, all that stuff, if you use this the next turn, then you'll be able to swing with them. Or if you've waited and you have a full board state, you'll be able to, you'll be able to hit a lot of people for a lot. Marionette Master has Fabricate 3, which means that you make the choice if you want this to come in with 3 1/1 counters or make 3 servo tokens. And then whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. You will be making a ton of treasures, a ton of clues, a ton of food. So every time you kill off one of those tokens, anytime you sacrifice one of those artifacts, you will be triggering Marionette Master. And whether that's hitting somebody for 4 or 1, it doesn't really matter. You're eventually going to kill them with this. Lastly, Laboratory Maniac. One thing that you can do with this is constantly, whenever you sacrifice a token, you can surveil, which means that you can send the top card of your library technically to the graveyard every time you surveil. So an option that you have, if you do not have anything else, or if you cannot win any way else, but you have a lab man in your hand, what you can do is on other people's turn, continually sacrifice stuff, surveilling as you go, sending your graveyard or your library to your graveyard. Then on your upkeep with lab man out, you win. So that's the main thing, is having it out. It says, if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. Now, there are, of course, other ways to draw cards, but the most likely way, if you have no other options, is just having this out on the field during your upkeep. So, yes, that is Eloise. I've had a ton of fun with her. It's, again, not something I usually do. Aristocrats hasn't been fun for me in the past. I've done a couple versions with Teysa Karlov. I've done Slimefoot Stowaway. And Eloise has been the first one that I've really just kind of enjoyed playing. So a lot of times when you're building decks and stuff, try to think about what you've enjoyed in the past, what you haven't enjoyed, and even giving things a chance that that you figure you're not going to have fun with again. Yeah, so I know what I like to do in Magic is to draw cards. It's to spam spells, and no matter what, even if I lose, if I got the chance to do those two things, I'm gonna have fun. And Eloise really helped me do that. Even though Aristocrats wasn't something fun that I've had in the past, Eloise kind of changed that aristocrat mindset for me. So thanks for joining me. Let me know what you think about the deck tech. What new things could I add to it? What things could you drop? What things specifically would you like to see if you've built Eloise, or if you already have an Eloise deck, how have you built her? Let me know in the comments section. Yeah, I've been Cardboard Currencies, and I'll see you next time. Bye.